What better way to start talking about video game lost media than with a topic I came across on the forums? I'm telling you guys, it's a great way to find new topics you weren't even aware existed, and it's exactly why I found this topic so interesting. The more time I spend playing retro games, the more invested in the older franchises I become, and likewise, I'd love to incorporate them into my lost media videos more. Unfortunately, these older series don't have a lot of lost media, so this topic was a nice surprise, and lets me discuss one of my favorite forgotten series, Hebereke. This started out as a platformer series on the Famicom developed by Sunsoft, and got a few spin-offs over the years as well. If you've never heard of Hebereke before, it might be because you're more familiar with its localized name, Euphoria the Saga, which didn't see a North American release for close to 20 years after it came out in Japan. While the series was not very popular here in the US, it was in Japan, and gave way to several spin-offs and ports, which is where the mystery begins. The thread I came across on the Lost Media Wiki forums was from Lusanio the Windows fan, who made mention of 3 lost Hebereke ports that were released for mobile. Hebereke's Papoon, which is a puzzle game, the original Hebereke platformer game, and Sugoi Hebereke, a fighting game. In the spirit of lost mobile content, which is always a fan favorite, it's interesting to discover that these slipped through the cracks entirely, with almost no further discussion in the thread, besides a couple bumps, and myself having made mention that the topic would be good for a video like this. It seems as though these ports went largely undocumented over all these years, so I did my best to see what I could uncover about them, even just simple information, but the details are really scarce. Hardcore Gaming 101 was the best resource I found, and stated that these titles were a collaboration between Sunsoft and another developer named Space Out for a release in 2003. It's also mentioned that these games were remakes rather than straight ports, which can be viewed by the accompanying screenshots, the only ones I could find. The colors are a lot more vibrant than the original game, and the sprites seem to have a lot more shading and depth as well. At first, I was wondering if this was simply a port of the PS1 version, but that was released a year prior, and is a direct port of the Famicom one. So despite the game appearing to play the same, there are certainly new elements to it. It's also not clear if there were any bonus modes or exclusive features in these ports, and I couldn't even find screenshots for the other games. No gameplay videos show up with a YouTube search either. If there's any hope for these games to be recovered, it's knowing that the community did a great job hunting down and dumping the ROMs for the Sonic Cafe games. While Sonic is way more popular than Hebereke, and there was much more documentation for the Cafe games than these ones, with a little awareness, I'm hoping these can reappear, and I'd be really happy about that. This next topic is another one that I was shocked to find at all, and it actually dates back to a mystery that I never quite solved over a decade ago, when I was first getting into Nintendo collecting. In the late 2000s, there wasn't a whole lot of Mario stuff on the market like there is nowadays, and I wasn't even buying stuff online, so the amount of merchandise I had to work with was pretty small. I would often search around my house for anything video game related that I could add to my display, just to make it seem like I had more than I actually did. Most of what I found back then were the old Hasbro Pokémon plushes, and some Sonic figures I played with as a kid. But there was one item that I had never come across before, even online, and had no idea what its origin was until recently. This item is a small collection of cards that depict Mario and friends giving the reader information about the real world, animals, space, and so on. As a kid, I always loved the artwork on them, and tried my hardest to discover what they were supposed to be and where they came from. At the time, however, there was nothing online about these, and no one in the collecting community seemed to know either, so I eventually concluded that they must have been a small promo item used to sell some kind of reference book to kids. Well, fast forward around a decade later, and I find a thread in the Lost Media Wiki forums called Mario Quiz Cards. It immediately feels familiar to me, and as I began looking through it, I got my answer about what those cards were. These are referred to as Mario Quiz cards, and as explained in the post, they were a licensed product that Nintendo released in 1995 to educate children about the world. Each card belongs to a different category of topics, as indicated by an emblem on the top right, and all feature unique artwork not seen elsewhere, usually of characters being depicted in ways not seen in the Mario universe. The cards I have were from a promo pack made to sell a subscription, as apparently, new cards were released monthly, and this is where the search begins. Forever Rainbows is attempting to archive the entire collection of these cards, which is currently over 900, but explains that there could be hundreds that are still missing, or not properly scanned into the collection, with the backs of the cards being a particularly rare scan to find. Similar to the SpotPass Me search, this one is accompanied by a Google Drive link that contains scans of all the known cards as well as photos of the known missing cards, but we don't know how many cards in total exist. Unfortunately, it seems as though the cards were distributed by several different companies and contain dates as late as 1997, but there's no information that can be used as a reference. I was blown away that so many cards not only exist, but have been documented this extensively, and you guys can help out with this search too. While finding new cards has been a bit of a challenge, it was mentioned that the cards came in decks of 20, and eBay seems to be a good place to find them. It might be a risk to buy decks not knowing if the cards are all repeats, but I also think it would be really exciting to find a new one in this way. This is a search that I think could really make some good progress with more support. Check out the dedicated Discord server if you have any new cards or information. I've been wanting to talk about the two topics in this next segment for quite a while, but I just never had the chance to, and now they fit pretty well into this video. It was right after I 100%ed Soul Calibur on Dreamcast, and wanted another 3D fighting game to try out, so Dead or Alive was the progression I took. The Dreamcast version was fun, but it seemed a little lacking in content, especially compared to Soul Calibur. So it was then I decided to look at the modern iterations from the series, and that's when I really started enjoying it. I bought 6 on the PS4 and played it quite a bit, which is where the memes come in. I really didn't like the default outfits the characters had, so I went to the shop hoping they'd have the classic ones I was familiar with from the older games. Well, they did have those ones and so much more. I knew the series was big on their different costumes, but this was really extensive, and I started looking through all of them, until I realized there was a bit of lost media relating to them. I noticed some of the costumes couldn't be unlocked in the game through normal means, and they couldn't even be bought as DLC. They just weren't available at all. At the time, I was thinking about trying to 100% the game, and these costumes would be ones I was missing. So I looked it up, and apparently, there is no way to get them anymore. The ones that are not for sale could only be obtained through limited time events like pre-ordering the game itself, and now that those events are over, you can't get the costumes. But this did get me thinking about other pieces of Dead or Alive lost media, and I actually did find another one that does make me disappointed, because it sounds like a game that would have been really fun to play. This game is called Dead or Alive Code Chronos, and was in development for the original Xbox in early 2002, as seen in this early box art mock-up sourced from IGN's website. It was supposed to act as a prequel game detailing how Kasumi and Ayane met before the events of the first Dead or Alive game, and was to stray from the fighting game formula in favor of being an action-adventure game like Ninja Gaiden. Despite high anticipation of the game within the fandom, it was never officially announced, and only details about its existence were referenced at the time. The most notable details surrounding its development were an interview with Play Magazine where Itagaki summarized the game's premise, and a promotional poster advertising Dead or Alive 4 shows the game teased alongside other upcoming projects at the bottom. Eventually, a dispute between Itagaki and Tecmo would halt production on the game, resulting in his departure from the company, which led to Team Ninja issuing a statement in 2010 that the game was officially cancelled, further stating that it was only at the framework level. Since so little from the game was created, there aren't any other assets available online from it, with the exception of the game's logo, though Unseen64 makes an interesting point in their article on the topic. Dead or Alive Ultimate, which was released on the original Xbox in 2004, contains a scene with young Kasumi and Ayane that could have originally been related to Code Chronos. We did get a handful of Dead or Alive games on the original Xbox, but I would have really enjoyed one that was more of an adventure, and it's unfortunate the series has never had another entry like this. Bet you didn't think we'd be learning about real-world history in a video talking about games, did you? Well, I came across this topic quite a while ago, and always wanted to discuss it in a video. I think this one would be perfect for it. It goes without saying that a lot of anime and video games have references to Japanese mythology within them, but it's not often you come across one that relates to a historical piece of lost media. One so important, in fact, that it's considered one of the most important artifacts to the whole Japanese culture, and I discovered the story surrounding it by playing a video game. In 1986, Namco released an arcade game called Genpei Tomaden, with a plot about a samurai named Taira no Kagekyo being resurrected to defeat his enemy's clan. While the resurrection part of the game is fictional, the rest isn't. Taira no Kagekyo was a real samurai who was killed during the Genpei War, and if you look at the game even closer, there's some lost history to find. In order to reach the final boss, one must obtain 3 artifacts known as the Sacred Treasures of Japan, which include the mirror called Yata no Kagami, the jewel called Yasakani no Magatama, and the sword Kusanagi no Tsurugi. All 3 of these treasures exist in real life, but have been lost over the centuries. So it should be expected that for their age and historical value, there are questions surrounding their current whereabouts, as well as stories passed down about their legacy. One such story states that the sword and the jewel were thrown into the sea at the end of the Genpei War in 1185, to avoid being taken by the enemy forces, while the mirror remained on board a ship, but allegedly blinded the soldier who tried to open the box where it was kept. Throughout the decades, there have been many claims about how they were passed down and what became of them in modern times, with the most accepted theory stating that the jewel is the only treasure still in existence, and is supported by documentation that was recorded in the early to mid-1900s. The other 2 artifacts have far fewer records associated with them, with claims that the mirror was either broken apart and its pieces scattered, or that it was burned in a fire. However, there is a claim contrary to these, that states one is allegedly housed at the Ise Grand Shrine, but this has not been confirmed as far as I can tell. The final of the 3 artifacts, Kusanagi no Tsurugi, is considered to be the most coveted of all the treasures, and has the widest variety of stories regarding its whereabouts, including one that states the Japanese government actually owns it. No one from the public has been able to verify this, and the only evidence we have to go off of was during the enthronement of Emperor Naruhito in 2019. A box claiming to contain the sword was present at the ceremony, but its contents were never seen, so it's not known whether or not the real sword is contained in it. Not to mention, there have also been many replicas that were created of the sword over centuries, so in some way, it might be impossible to prove its authenticity unless there are historical documents that can be found to source where it ended up. If any of you out there have ever played a 3DS, you might remember some of the integration the system had with Mii characters. There were a variety of activities you could do with your Mii, including the Find Me battle game and accessing the Street Pass Mii Plaza. Actually, the Mii Plaza is exactly where this topic takes place. The Mii Plaza was the hub for interaction with the Mii characters, kinda like the Mii channel on the Wii, but much more in depth. The biggest feature you probably remember are the 3D puzzles that could be completed by collecting pieces from other players. They were received wirelessly from people in real life, who also had a 3DS system and were within range of yours, which also allowed their Mii characters to populate your plaza. I used to go to the mall and walk around a lot to get these. It was a lot of fun. But our mystery begins with the Miis received via Spot Pass, or over the internet. While you most commonly obtained new Miis from people in real life, occasionally, Nintendo would distribute special Mii characters through Wi-Fi. These ones were often of notable Nintendo people like Miyamoto, Reggie, and even Sakurai, which were distinguished by a pair of gold pants. However, these special Miis were only distributed for a certain amount of time, and sometimes could only be obtained during special events, like E3, or at a Nintendo Zone location, which means if you didn't get them when they were available, you no longer can. And that begins the search to archive them all. There's a thread on the Lost Media Wiki forums by Jaylene that was made earlier this year, and discusses the search to dump and preserve every gold pants Mii that was distributed over Spot Pass. I didn't even think this was something that could be preserved, or that anyone wanted to archive, but apparently it can be done, and it's a pretty cool idea. Think of this like collecting Pokémon that were available over Wi-Fi or at GameStop during a designated period of time. The post contains a Google Doc that archives which Miis have been preserved and which ones are still lost, across North America, Japan, and Europe, with the majority of lost Miis being from Japan. Europe is still missing one, but North America appears to be complete. There's another link that leads to a Google Drive folder which contains the QR codes for the special Miis that have been dumped, and it allows you to add them to your consoles all these years after they were discontinued. I really like the idea of searching for these Miis. It's like trying to find a recording on a VHS tape, just with a different form of media. And the search might even go beyond what's documented in this thread. It states the Google Doc details the known Miis, which implies there could be more out there that haven't been discovered yet. I'm not too familiar with this search beyond what's presented here, and I don't know if there's a separate community trying to uncover even more, but what is here makes for a great search in itself. If you have any of the Miis that are still missing, be sure to let us know. It's interesting to think about how awareness for preservation has really become a bigger idea nowadays than it was several years ago, and the further back in time you travel, the less of a priority it was. This is simply because no one was thinking about saving content for the future, and the ways in which one would go about that were also a lot more primitive. It was only a decade ago that Nintendo started releasing Pokémon exclusively through Wi-Fi events without the need to travel to a retail store and download a Pokémon while physically there. But even the ways in which you can save your Pokémon have improved over the years, with bigger storage options and ways to keep track of them. I remember when I was trying to catch all the Pokémon before I had Mew, I looked into ways to achieve the Mew glitch in Yellow, then transfer it to the GBA games and into the DS ones. But you can't even transfer Gen 2 Pokémon to Gen 3. It's impossible through normal means. And this, in combination with poor archival, created a scenario for what might be the rarest and hardest to obtain Pokémon of all time. I don't usually browse the Lost Media subreddit, but a few weeks ago I was looking for new video ideas, and came upon a thread that blew my mind. This thread is about the very first Pokémon event that was ever held, and includes an image advertising the event, along with details that discuss the specifics of it. This was known as the Legendary Mew offer, and was only available in Japan in 1996 for about a month, beginning on April 15th. But unlike the Wi-Fi events we're familiar with today, this one required the player to send in their cartridge through the mail to get Mew placed in it. However, this event was more of a contest, and it wasn't a guarantee that you'd even get the Pokemon, with it being stated that only 20 were given out at all. Bulbapedia gives some details about Mew that make it identifiable, including that it was level 5, had an original trainer ID that was also the name of the magazine, and had ID numbers that varied from 1 to 20, depending on which one of the 20 you received. Mew was placed onto the cartridges via the link cable, and the contest received 78,000 entrants. But even without considering all the factors, like there only being 20 in existence, and it being a Japan exclusive, there are so many other problems in finding or obtaining this Pokemon nowadays, with the biggest issue being the age of the event. Save batteries in the old Pokemon games have a shelf life and will delete save data once they need to be replaced. So it's unlikely that there are any carts with their original batteries that are still working. It's possible that someone with Mew could have constantly traded it to games with new batteries in them, or transferred it to Pokemon Stadium, but that also seems unlikely. There's also the issue of simply identifying a copy of the game as one that received the Mew, since there'd be no way to tell by looking at listings for the game. And I'm sure no one would be selling the game and specifically state there's a Mew from the contest on it. This also raises another issue about the legitimacy of the Pokemon, since hacking the game and creating fakes is so easy to do now. You'd have to put a lot of faith into the circumstances surrounding it if one was to resurface. But I really think in general, the fact that only 20 were in existence is a pretty good indicator that you'll never find this Pokemon again. There apparently was a list of winners that were announced in the magazine after the contest had ended, so technically it would be possible to try and find these people and ask if they still have their game card or Mew, but even that is quite a stretch. Maybe with some more discussion about this event and interest in finding it, the word can spread in gaming circles and reach an owner of one of the carts. I actually think it would be really cool to unearth this Pokemon in the modern day, especially given its historical significance as the first event Pokemon. But it goes back to that idea of people not thinking about preserving something like a sprite in a video game back in the mid-90s. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Be sure to check out some of my other Lost Media videos. Thanks for watching, and until next time, Finn.